Hey, it's Dr. Allin here at Evolve Chiropractic in Woodstock. I wanted to go over a research study that showed that people with type 2 diabetes or issues with controlling their blood sugar metabolism undergo earlier stages of degeneration in their spine, especially the discs that go between each one of the vertebrae. So this is important because a lot of patients that come into the clinic here are trying to heal their spine. So they have a damaged disc that's degenerated. It's now compressed or herniated, bulged, pushing on a nerve, creating symptoms, and we're trying to get that to heal. So the problem is that we're running into with some patients that have issues with blood sugar regulations that their body's not healing the way that it's supposed to. So this study was very important in the fact that it gives us a little bit of light into what we do with our body and how we create an environment for our body to heal. Has a huge role through the recovery process, the rehabilitative process whenever we have degeneration or some form of an injury. So what can we do if we have issues with blood sugar management or blood sugar control? So it doesn't necessarily have to be type 2 diabetes. We could be looking at pre-diabetes or something called metabolic syndrome, where your body is kind of heading down that pathway towards its inability to control insulin levels, thus creating a problem with blood sugar control as well. So how do we control our blood sugar? Number one thing we can do is increase fiber in our diet. So the easiest way to do that, I say easy because it's relatively easy to control what we put in our mouth. We have to eat more fruits and vegetables. And these are fruits and vegetables in their whole form. So we don't want to do juicing because when we juice something, it actually takes the fiber out of the vegetable or the fruit and it creates a spike in your blood sugar. So having the fiber in the fruits or vegetables creates the ability to slow down the absorption of glucose or the breakdown of the sugars in your body and kind of baselines and prevents that spike from happening. The other way to do that would be through other high starchy or fiber type foods like beans or legumes. If you follow more of like a paleo diet, typically beans, legumes are pushed out of the equation. But my philosophy is if we're ever trying to achieve something and we're eating like a standard American diet, and we have issues with blood sugar regulation, we can start with these things that are a little bit easier to feed into our diet, a little bit easier to stay compliant with, and most people will eat some form of beans or legumes, typically speaking. So that's another way that you can get higher levels of fiber in your diet. Exercise is a big one. So number 2, exercise. Research has shown that there are some pretty big improvements of people's blood sugar regulation when they practice something called high intensity interval training. Now that type of training is done at short spurts and it says high intensity. So you're pretty much working to your max capacity of aerobic activity. So that's kind of like you're not able to maintain a conversation because you're breathing so hard and you're sweating so hard, right? So high intensity interval training is not for everybody, especially if you have cardiovascular issues, which a lot of the times if you're having issues controlling your blood sugar, you're going to have some issues with the cardiovascular system. So it's always good to check in with your doctor prior to beginning any kind of new exercise regimen. But if something like this would not be available for you, moderate aerobic activity, that basically means you are either walking at a brisk pace, you're jogging, but it's more of a long duration. So somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes. Your heart rate is up pretty significantly. The best way to think about it is you can hold a conversation with somebody, but you're still breathing heavily and you're starting to perspire. So that's, again, long duration, so 30 to 45 minutes of exercise, ideally 4 to 5 times a week. Now, stress management is a big one, and that can come in the form of different forms of breath work, different forms of meditation or mindfulness practices. But what they found is that if you're able to reduce your cortisol levels, which is your fight or flight, your stress hormones, and a lot of people are kind of stuck in a fight or flight state, whether that's your job or home life or you're in chronic pain. These things can actually increase your cortisol, which will actually affect the way that your body controls its blood sugar. So if you're able to look into some stress management techniques, there's a lot of them out there. It doesn't really have to be anything fancy, but as long as there's some research behind it that shows you're reducing your cortisol levels, that's a big one. Yoga is actually a great practice to help. There were actually some studies that looked at the effect on blood sugar regulation, so that can kind of combine stress management and exercise into both. So hopefully this helps you out. If you've ever been diagnosed with prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, diabetes type 2, just know that your body is not healing the way that it's supposed to, and it's actually breaking itself down a lot faster than the average person would be. So getting those blood sugar levels under control is going to help you tremendously, especially if you're in a rehabilitative setting like in my office here. So if you have any questions on any of this, feel free to reach out. I'd be glad to help you. Be safe, have fun, get at it. See you soon.